Los Angeles, California. Downtown Sports Arena, February 12, 1972. Saturday night, 8:30 p.m. The air inside the arena is thick, not with smoke or sweat, but with expectation. 300 people crowd into a space built for boxing matches, yet tonight there are no tickets, no posters, no official bout. No one here can prove they were invited. No one here is supposed to talk about what they are about to witness. This is not a fight. It is a rumor made flesh. For 3 weeks, whispers have spread through Los Angeles like a controlled fire, through boxing gyms, martial arts schools, Hollywood backrooms, and private parties where egos collide after midnight. A challenge has been issued. A challenge that should never have been spoken out loud. At the center of it stands Muhammad Ali, 6 feet 3 inches tall, 210 pounds of precision, speed, and punishment. The undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. The man who floats like a butterfly and stings like a bee. The man who has humiliated champions, broken legends, and danced away from punches before they were even thrown. The man who has stood across from the strongest, meanest fighters alive, and walked away untouched. Tonight, he stands in the center of a professional boxing ring. White trunks, red gloves, skin gleaming under the lights like polished marble. His body is a monument to dominance, shoulders carved like stones, arms thick with controlled violence, a chest that has absorbed thousands of punches and kept rising. He looks relaxed, comfortable, almost amused. Because tonight, Muhammad Ali is not defending a title. Tonight, he is issuing a dare. Across from him stands a man who does not belong in this ring. Bruce Lee, 5 feet 7 inches tall, 135 pounds, no championships, no professional record, no sanctioned fights. To the boxing world, he is a nobody, a martial arts instructor from Hong Kong, a philosophy-driven fighter making waves in Hollywood demonstrations. A man whispered about more than he is documented. They say his speed defies vision. They say his punches arrive before the mind registers movements. They say he understands the human body in ways Western combat never learned. And that is why this crowd is here. This began 3 weeks earlier at a private Beverly Hills party. Expensive drinks, famous faces, and Muhammad Ali holding court like royalties. Someone mentioned Bruce Lee. Someone joked that Lee claimed martial arts could beat boxing. Ali laughed, not cruelly, not angrily, but with the confidence of a man who has never been proven wrong. "Bring him to me," Ali said, his voice carrying through the room. "Let him hit me. I'll stand still. I won't block. I won't move. Let me see this kung fu magic everyone talks about." The room laughed. The challenge was not meant to be real, but words spoken by Muhammad Ali never stay contained. By morning, the martial arts schools of Los Angeles were buzzing. By afternoon, Hollywood studios were whispering. By evening, newspapers and radio stations were repeating the impossible headline, "Muhammad Ali challenges Bruce Lee." Bruce read the article the next day in silence. He was teaching a private class when a student placed the newspaper in front of him. He scanned the words slowly, then folded the paper with care and set it aside. "Interesting," he said. That was all. 2 weeks of tension followed. Ali's camp pushed publicly. They wanted spectacle. Proof that boxing stood above all else. Bruce's side hesitated. This was not a real fight. This was a trap. If Bruce refused, he would be labeled afraid. If he accepted and failed, his reputation would be erased. And if he succeeded, he would have to do the impossible. he would have to strike the fastest heavyweight boxer in history. Cleanly, decisively, without excuse. Finally, Bruce Lee made his decisions. He called Ali's manager himself. "I accept," he said, "but this is not a fight. One strike, he stands still. I strike once. Then it ends. No cameras. No media. Only witnesses. And now, on this February night, 300 people hold their breath as history quietly steps into the rings. The downtown sports arena was never meant to feel like this. Normally, it smelled of sweat and chalk, echoed with bell rings and crowd noise, alive with the clean structure of sanctioned violence. Tonight, it felt different, wrong, almost secretive. The overhead lights burned brighter than usual, isolating the ring in a pool of white glare, while everything beyond it dissolved into shadows. The effect was theatrical, almost ritualistic, as if the building itself understood this was not a sporting event, but a test. 300 people filled the space, far fewer than the arena could hold, yet it felt suffocating. No tickets. No ushers. No announcements. Everyone here had been invited quietly, selectively, deliberately. Trainers who had molded champions. Martial artists whose names carried weight in closed rooms. Journalists who knew better than to bring notebooks. Hollywood actors who sensed history more than they understood it. And ordinary men and women who had heard the rumor and somehow slipped through the cracks. They were witnesses now, whether they wanted to be or not. At ringside, the tension was unmistakable. Conversations happened in whispers. Arguments flared and died quickly. Some believed this was a joke that had gone too far. Others were convinced they were about to see a humiliation, just not sure whose. A few, very few, stood silently, watching the ring with expressions that suggested unease rather than excitement. Because this wasn't how legends were supposed to meet. Muhammad Ali stood loose in the center of the ring, rolling his shoulders, bouncing lightly on his feet. He looked exactly as the world expected him to look, confident, playful, untouchable. He smiled at faces in the crowd, nodded at trainers he recognized, raised his arms slightly as if soaking in invisible applause. This was his kingdom. This was his stage. He thrived under eyes, under pressures, under expectation. Even without cameras, Ali performed. It was instinct. It was survival. It was who he was. His red gloves flashed under the lights as he shook out his arms, the sound of leather faint but sharp in the silence. Across from him stood Bruce Lee. No robe, no showmanship, no movement wasted. He looked almost out of place, smaller than anyone expected, quieter than the moment demanded. His posture was upright but relaxed, his hands resting naturally at his sides. There was no visible tension in his shoulders, no flexings, no attempt to appear threatening. To many in the crowd, this was unsettling. Fighters usually broadcast intention. They tighten, they stare. They prepare the audience for violence. Bruce did none of that. He simply existed in the ring, breathing evenly, eyes forwards, as if the world beyond Ali did not exist. The contrast was jarring. Ali was sound in motion and presence. Bruce was stillness. Ali noticed it. His grin widened at first, amused by the difference in energy, by the absurdity of the situation. He circled half a step, then stopped, planting his feet in the center of the ring, like a man claiming territory. "You ready, little man?" Ali called out, his voice echoing through the arena. Loud, confident, meant for everyone to hear. He tapped his own jaw with his glove. "Right here. Your best shot. I won't block, I won't move. I'll stand right here and take it." A ripple moved through the crowd, not cheers this time, but discomforts. This felt less like courage and more like cruelty, less like confidence and more like bait. Bruce did not answer. Not a word. Not a nod. Not a change in expression. The referee stepped between them, his presence suddenly fragile in a moment far larger than his authorities. He was a professional, experienced, accustomed to chaos, but this was something else entirely. "Gentlemen," he said carefully, glancing from Ali to Bruce. "Let's be clear on the terms." He looked at Ali first. "You understand you will not defend yourself. No blockings. No movement." Ali nodded casually, still smiling. "I've been hit by the hardest men alive. Let him try." The referee turned to Bruce. "One strike only. Head or body. After that, this demonstration ends." Bruce met his eyes and nodded once. "I understand." His voice was calm, low, and steady, and it carried farther than it should have. Something shifted in the room. The referee stepped back. No bell rang. No announcement followed. There was only silence. Ali spread his arms wide and dropped his guard completely. His gloves hung loose at his sides. His chin was exposed. His chest open. The heavyweight champion of the world stood defenseless, offering himself as a target. It was arrogance made physical. And it was terrifying. Bruce did not move. 1 second passed. Then 2. Then 3. The crowd began to stir, unsure what to do with the waitings. A few people leaned forward. Others exchanged glances. Was this hesitation? Fear? Regret? From the outside, it looked like Bruce Lee was frozen. But inside, he was measuring. Distance. Timing. Breath. He took a single step forward, just one. Now he stood closer, close enough to reach, close enough to strike. Still, his hands remained at his sides. His shoulders stayed loose. His breathing never changed. Ali's grin faded slightly. For the first time that night, something unfamiliar touched his expression. His eyes narrowed, not in mockery, but in recognition. He was seeing something in Bruce's gaze that could not be faked. Focus. Absolute, unblinking focus. Not the focus of aggressions. The focus of inevitability. The arena seemed to contract around them. The lights hummed. The air felt heavy. 300 people stood suspended between before and after, not yet understanding that the line between the two was about to disappear. Bruce shifted his weight, and then nothing else mattered. No one in the arena realized they had stopped breathing. Time stretched thin, elastic, fragile. The silence was no longer empty, it was heavy, crushing, filled with the collective tension of 300 people, waiting for something they could not define. Every eye was locked on the space between the two men. The distance was small now, close enough to feel body heat, close enough to end everything. Muhammad Ali stood exactly as promised, hands down, guard open, chin exposed. The greatest defensive fighter in boxing history had abandoned defense entirely. Years of instinct screamed against it, but pride held him still. This was his challenge, his moment, his certainty. Bruce Lee stood motionless. To the untrained eye, he looked passive, almost gentle. His shoulders were relaxed. His fingers were loose, not curled into fists. There was no visible preparation, no tightening of muscles, no dramatic shift in posture. He was not coiling for power. He was waiting. Ali felt it before he understood it. That grin, the one that had humiliated opponents and thrilled crowds, drained from his face. His jaw tightened slightly. His eyes narrowed, tracking Bruce's chest, his shoulders, his hands. He was searching for a tell. A twitch. Anything. There was nothing. Bruce's gaze never left Ali's eyes. In that moment, something passed between them, an unspoken exchange that had nothing to do with showmanship or bravado. It was recognition, not of size, not of reputation, but of danger. Then Bruce moved, not like a punch, not like anything boxing had trained men to recognize. There was no wind-ups, no shoulder rotation, no hip twist, no telegraph. His right hand simply wasn't there, and then it was. A flicker, a blur, a movement so compact and precise that the mind struggled to register it as an action. Bruce's fist traveled from his side to Ali's body in a straight, efficient line, covering inches instead of feet, time measured not in seconds but fractions of them. The sound was sharp. Not a thud, not a crack. A snap. It landed just below Ali's sternum, clean, exact, merciless, the solar plexus, the nerve center of breath, the body's off switch. The effect was immediate. Ali did not fly backward. He did not stagger. There was no dramatic fall. Instead, his body betrayed him. His knees buckled as if the floor had vanished. His arms dropped from their wide, confident spread. His mouth opened instinctively, drawing in air that refused to come. His diaphragm seized, locking tight in violent spasm. The heavyweight champion of the world tried to breathe, and could not. The crowd did not react. No gasp, no shout, no cheer. 300 people stood frozen, staring at something their minds could not reconcile. This wasn't how knockdowns looked. This wasn't how power manifested. This wasn't boxing. Ali sank to one knee, then the other. Canvas met flesh. Muhammad Ali, invincible, untouchable, immortal, was on his knees. 5 seconds passed. They felt like 5 years. Ali's hands pressed against the mat, his body leaning forward as his nervous system struggled to recover. His eyes were open. He was conscious, aware, humiliated not by pain, but by the sudden betrayal of his own body. His lungs burned. Still no air. Bruce Lee stood over him, not looming, not triumphant. Still, his hand had already returned to his side. His breathing was calm, controlled, unchanged. There was no celebration in his posture, no acknowledgement of the crowd, no reaction at all. It was as if the strike had never happened, only its consequence. The referee snapped out of paralysis and rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside Ali. "Champion," he said urgently. "Can you breathe?" Ali nodded weakly, his face tight with disbelief as his diaphragm finally released its grip. A ragged breath tore into his lungs. Then another. His body shuddered as sensation returned, systems rebooting one by one. The crowd exhaled with him. Whispers erupted instantly, confused, frantic, overlapping. "How did he? That wasn't even. Did you see it?" "I didn't see anything." Ali lifted his head. His eyes found Bruce's. And for the first time in his career, Muhammad Ali had no words. Bruce extended his hand. There was no hesitation. Ali stared at it for a moment, searching Bruce's face for mockery, for pride, for something to explain what had just happened. There was nothing. He took the hands. Bruce pulled him up with surprising ease. Ali stood unsteady, shaking his head, trying to clear the fog, not from concussion, but from shocks. He touched his own chest, then looked back at Bruce, his voice hoarse, stripped of performance. "What did you do?" Bruce leaned in slightly. His reply meant only for Ali. "I showed you what you asked to see." Ali listened. "Martial arts is not about power." Bruce continued quietly. "It is about precision, about understanding the body. You strike strength, you fight strength. You strike weakness, strength disappears." Ali swallowed hard. For the first time that night, He was not the center of the moment. He was its witness. The arena did not explode into applause. It fractured. Half the crowd surged forward, voices rising in disbelief, shock spilling out in half-finished sentences. The other half stayed frozen, rooted to the floor, eyes locked on the ring as if waiting for reality to correct itself. Trainers stared at their own hands. Martial artists exchanged glances that carried decades of quiet validation. Journalists whispered to one another, already arguing over whether this moment would ever be allowed to exist. Because what had just happened broke rules no one had written down, but everyone believed in. Muhammad Ali stood upright now, breathing steady again, yet something fundamental had shifted. His posture was different. The looseness was gone. The playfulness had evaporated. He rolled his shoulders once, slowly, as if checking that they still belonged to him. They did. But the certainty was gone. He looked around the ring, not at the crowd, not at the lights, but at the space itself, as though searching for an explanation in the air. He had been hit before. Hit harder, hit cleaner, hit by men who built careers on destructions. None of them had done this. None of them had taken his breath without warning. None of them had silenced his body with such casual efficiency. Bruce Lee stepped back a single pace. The distance reappeared between them, not as separation, but as respect. He did not raise his arms. He did not bow. He did not acknowledge the noise growing around the ring. His role in this moment was already complete. Ali finally spoke, his voice low, stripped of performance. "You didn't hit my power," he said more to himself than anyone else. "You hit something else." Bruce nodded once. "Everyone has a center," he replied quietly. "A place where control lives. That is where the fight ends before it begins." The referee cleared his throat, unsure whether he was supposed to end something that no longer existed. There was no bell to ring, no winner to declare. This was not boxing. This was not martial arts. This was exposure. Ali looked at Bruce again. Truly looked this time. Not as a curiosity. Not as a challenger. But as a man who had just reached through muscle, reputation, and legends, and touched something deeper. Ali extended his glove. Bruce took it. The gesture was simple, almost private, but the meaning was seismic. Then Ali did something no one expected. He lifted Bruce's arm into the air. Not high, not dramatic, but unmistakable. The crowd erupted, some cheering, some arguing, some shouting accusations before anyone could finish processing what they had seen. "It was staged. He let him do it. That wasn't a real punch," others shouted back. "You didn't see it. You don't understand what you saw. That was real." Bruce released Ali's glove and turned away. He did not linger. He did not answer questions. He did not offer explanations. He stepped out of the ring and walked through the crowd, people instinctively parting to let him pass. No one stopped him. No one touched him. He exited the arena and disappeared into the Los Angeles night exactly the way he had entered the ring, quietly. Ali remained behind. Trainers surrounded him. Journalists leaned in close, asking questions they were not supposed to ask in a place that was not supposed to exist. Ali answered them all with the same calm honesty. "He hit me," Ali said. "I didn't see it, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe." The words spread fast. Too fast to be contained, but not fast enough to be accepted. By morning, the story was already dissolving. No film. No official record. Sports editors dismissed it. Promoters laughed it off. Boxing purists called it impossible. How could a 135-pound man drop the heavyweight champion of the world with a single strike? It defied logic. It defied physics. It defied the story people needed to believe. So they chose another one. They called it a myth. But myths don't leave champions silent. In public, Ali gave the expected answers when asked who hit him the hardest. Foreman. Frazier. Liston. Names that fit inside boxing's boundaries. But in privates, late at night, away from cameras and crowds, he told the truth. There was one, he said. One punch. I never saw it coming. And that truth stayed locked inside him. Because some knowledge isn't meant to be proved. It's meant to be remembered. By morning, the city had already begun to forget. Not because nothing happened, but because what happened did not fit inside the world people understood. There were no photographs to argue over, no grainy footage to slow down and analyze, no official scorecards or commission statements. Just 300 people carrying a memory that refused to behave like a memory should. In boxing gyms across Los Angeles, trainers shook their heads and laughed it off. In martial arts schools, the story spread in low voices, repeated carefully, reverently. In newsrooms, editors dismissed it before the first sentence could be written. Impossible stories do not survive daylight. They survive whispers. The names attached to the rumor made it even easier to bury. Muhammad Ali, the greatest heavyweight of all times, reduced to his knees by a man nearly half his size. And that man, Bruce Lee, a martial artist, an actor, a philosopher. Not even a professional fighter by Western standards. It was easier to call it theater. Easier to call it staged. Easier to pretend it never happened. Ali understood that immediately. He had spent his entire life shaping narratives, controlling rooms with words as much as fists. He knew how stories lived and how they died. And this one could not be allowed to live in public. So he let it fade. When reporters asked who hit him the hardest, he gave the answers the world expected. George Foreman, Joe Frazier, Sonny Liston. Names that made sense. Names that fit inside the rules. But there were moments, quiet ones, when Ali told the truth, not to crowds, not to cameras, to friends, to fighters, to men who understood that combat was more than muscle and bravado. He hit me, Ali would say. I didn't see it. And I couldn't breathe. That was all. He never tried to explain it beyond that. Because explanations weaken truths that don't need defending. Bruce Lee never corrected the record. He never sought validations. Never told the story himself. Never chased belief. He continued teaching, training, refining a philosophy built not on dominance, but on efficiencies, on understanding, on striking not where strength lived, but where control ended. To him, the moment in the ring was not a victory. It was a demonstration, and demonstrations do not require applause. Years passed, then decades. Bruce Lee died young, becoming a legend frozen in time. Muhammad Ali aged into history, his voice softer, his body slower, his legacy secure beyond challenge. The world remembered them in separate categories, one as a boxer, one as a martial artist. The night they briefly crossed paths remained unofficial, unprovable, uncomfortable. But for those who stood in that arena on February 12, 1972, inside a downtown sports venue in Los Angeles, the memory never faded. They remembered the silence, the stillness, the sound that wasn't a sound, the sight of the greatest boxer alive on his knees, searching for air. They remembered learning something dangerous. That power does not always announce itself. That size does not equal control. That mastery is quiets, and that sometimes the most terrifying truths are the ones the world refuses to believe. Because if that strike was real, if that moment truly happened, then everything people think they know about strength is wrong, and some truths are too heavy to carry. This is Liturgy of Fear, where the stories that should not exist refuse to stay buried.